Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we are here today to learn Fusion 360 or die trying. Okay, this is lesson number 3 in this series. In lesson number 1, we talked about something very important, and that was that you sort of win or lose the battle of Fusion 360 in the two-dimensional sketch mode. Okay, you're going to win or lose in two-dimensional sketch mode, and what we learned in lesson number 1 was the importance of dimension and position. Everything that you do in the 2D sketch mode, you're very deliberate about dimension and about position. Then in lesson number 2, we came in and we just did a very simple 3D extrusion here, and you can see here it is in the virtual world in the design space of Fusion 360, and here it is printed out. And so the kind of really neat thing is that we were able to go through a really quick demonstration of sketching something in 2 dimensions, mindful about position and dimension, and then doing a quick extrusion, and then we were able to print it on our 3D printer. Well, in today's lesson, lesson number 3, this is the most important lesson in the whole series. And in fact, what you're going to learn today is going to allow you to make Fusion 360 sing for you and dance for you. And it's something that is really, it's also a reason that you've tried the Autodesk, the AutoCAD programs, and just banged your head against the wall and just given up, folded up like a cheap lawn chair, run from the room crying like a little girl or little boy, or just absolutely panicking, maybe having to go and get some sort of medical help because you just could not get Fusion 360 or AutoCAD products to work. And what's going on is there's something going on in the background that you don't know, and almost any problem that you have in Fusion 360 has to do with this concept of constraints. And once you understand the idea of constraints, it's like a light bulb going off in your head. All of a sudden you understand what Fusion 360 is doing, and you understand how to make it do what you want it to do. So today is the most important lesson in this whole series of lessons, and that's to understand this concept of constraints. And you fight the battle of constraints, really fight it at the two-dimensional level. And I shouldn't say fight it, it's like you should make it sing to your music. You should make it march to your direction by getting this concept of constraints work. Enough of this nonsense, let's get going. What should we do? We should come over here and we should click on File, and we should say New Design. Okay, and then I should get out of your way. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to sketch a rectangle. How would we sketch a rectangle? Well, we would come up and we would say we want to sketch, and then what is this nonsense? It's asking us where we want to sketch. Where do I want to sketch? I'm a math teacher. I'm old school. I sketch in X and Y, and then Z is for extrusion. X is red, Y is green, so if I click right here, I will get a drawing piece of graph paper, a nice two-dimensional graph paper in the XY plane. What do I want? I want to make a rectangle. I'm already in rectangle mode, but just to make sure, I type the R key. I'm now ready to draw a rectangle. I click on the origin, I click, I drag, and I click again. Now what do I have? I have a rectangle. The rectangle is in the right position. It's the wrong dimension. What do? Learned in lesson 1, we're mindful. We set the dimension. How do we do that? I click D. Click D. Now, I click with the mouse on this line. I click, I come up, I click again, now I type in the dimension, 50 millimeters, enter. What do I have now? A rectangle that's in the right position with one side the right dimension. Other side, dimension still needs to be set. I am still in dimension mode. How do I know that? I've got the 2 little parallel lines by my cursor. So I can come here, I can click on this line. I click, I pull away, I click again. What do I want this? I want this 25, enter. What do I have now? A rectangle that is in the right position and the right dimension. This is what we talked about in lesson number 1. But what I want to show you now is this is where you just kind of die and you give up on Fusion 360. And like, let me show you what goes wrong really quick. What is it that the natural thing that you might want to do? One thing is you might want to change the dimension. I could get select, I could come in, double click, and I could say 35, enter. What did I do? I changed the dimension. Double click on this, say 15, enter. What did I do? I changed the dimension. double click, make this 25, enter. Look at this. What am I doing? I am able to set the dimension. What's the other thing that's a natural thing you might want to do is move it, right? We talk about position, we talk about dimension. So I come in here, I select it, I grab the corner and it doesn't move. Okay, maybe I need to grab the edge. I grab the edge, it doesn't move. Maybe I grab the middle, it doesn't move. So what do? I go to Google and I say, how do I move a 2D sketch in Fusion 360? It gives you other instructions. You come over here, you click and drag over it to select it. Now you come, you right mouse click and you say move or copy. And then you've got this complicated move box, but I want an easy move. What's the easiest one? Let's do a translate. And look, it gives me an arrow to move it left and right or up and down. Well, I'm going to grab this one, click, and then I'm going to move it and let it go, and it didn't move. Maybe I need to click OK. I click OK, it doesn't move. Let me try it again. Maybe it just likes to move up and down. Right mouse click, move. Okay, let's move it up. Okay, doesn't move. I try everything, I'm completely stuck, and then I just bang my head against the wall. I give up, I quit, I curse the day that Autodesk was ever born. I curse the day that Fusion 360 was ever made. What's going on? You're going to get hung in Fusion 360 where you tell it to do something and it doesn't do it. Why does it not do it? Because there's something going on in the background that you're not familiar with. It's a concept to CAD software that you don't run into in things like Microsoft PowerPoint. It is the concept of constraints. And Fusion 360 or Autodesk or other high-end CAD software will always respect the constraints over your personal request. You personally requested that this device move, but there were constraints that kept it from moving. Okay, so that's what you've got to understand. Once you understand constraints, then all of a sudden Fusion 360 is going to be your baby. It's going to do whatever you want. Okay, but you've got to understand constraints. So what are the constraints? The constraints are these strange little symbols that are around on your drawing. So all I did was draw a rectangle and put dimensions on it, but now I've got these other things. What does this little symbol here tell it? Well, you see when I point at the symbol, it lights up that top line. That is saying that this top line is constrained to be horizontal. You can ask for something else, but it's not going to listen to you because it's going to listen to the constraint. It's going to respect the constraint before it listens to you. But that's okay, right? Because you told it to draw a rectangle, and one of the characteristics of a rectangle is you kind of have two parallel sides. So if this is horizontal and this is horizontal, that means they're parallel. That means you're well on your way to having a rectangle. And look at this. This side is constrained to be vertical, and this side is constrained to be vertical. So if we have two vertical lines and two horizontal lines, we are well on our way to having a rectangle. But what's something else that has to be true? Okay, like let me show you here. Okay, I have that. I hit line, and then I draw this, click, check, and then I draw this, click, check. I draw this, click, check. Okay, I have two lines that are parallel and horizontal. I have two lines that are parallel and vertical, but I do not have a rectangle. Why not? The other thing is that the corners need to be coincident. The endpoint of this line needs to be coincident with the endpoint of that line. And so let me get my select tool and let's look here. What do I have? I have this symbol here, which is another constraint that says the endpoint of this line is coincident with the endpoint of this line. Now you might do anything else, but those two are locked together. And that's what's missing here. Well, let's look. Here is the coincident tool. So what if I get the coincident tool and I say I want this point this point to be coincident with that point. That point and that point are coincident. Oh, look, now they're connected. Looks a little bit more like a rectangle. What else would I like? I would like that point to be coincident with that point. Oh my. How about this? That is coincident to that. Now what else do I need? That is coincident with that. Boom. Now you see I took 4 line segments and now they're a rectangle because why? 2 sides are both vertical, 2 sides are both horizontal, and the endpoints are pinned together. I have a rectangle. And so if I look here, and let me get my select tool, I look at this corner, I can click on the corner here. Let me get the select tool. Okay. Now if I look at this corner, it gives me this coincident symbol, meaning the endpoints of those 2 line segments are tied together. And look, I have another one here. Look, I have another one here. So what do I have? When I said a rectangle, what it did was it put these 4 line segments and put them away together mathematically, formally, that creates a rectangle. So what's the problem? Why this long discourse? Let's look at this corner. Uh-oh, I have 2 constraints. The first one, if I point at it, it lights up this line and it lights up this line. Lights up this line and this line. It means the endpoint of this and the endpoint of this are tied at the corner. That's a good thing. But what happens if I look at this? It lights up the origin. What does that tell me? That those two corners are pinned to the origin. That's why you can't move it, because it is going to respect the constraints over what you request it to do. So let's look at that. What can we do? We can click on that and we can delete. Now what can I do? I can select the whole thing. Let me select this one and get rid of it now. Okay. Now what can I do? I can select this whole thing. I can come over here, I can get this corner and look, I moved it. Or I could get this and I could move it. Or I could get this I could move it. You know, almost anything I do now will let me move it. What if I select it, right mouse click, say move copy, and then say translate, and look at this. Now this moves it up and down, and this one moves it left and right. Do you see all of a sudden it's singing for me? It's doing everything I want. What was the problem? When you draw things, Fusion 360 helps you by putting constraints in. And sometimes it puts a constraint in that you're not expecting, and when it does, all of a sudden the other things don't work. So if Fusion 360 isn't doing what you expect, go in and look at the constraints. So what constraints have we learned so far? You see over here in our sketch palette, these are our constraints. Well, one thing is we learned coincident. What does coincident do? It says this is going to be tied to this. So let's look at one thing. Okay, so I'm gonna come up here and I'm just gonna click L for line. I'm gonna draw a line, click again, click on the check mark, click here, click here, click on the check mark. So what could I do? I could say make things coincident. So I get the coincident tool and I click here and then I click here, and now those two are connected. Now I can move this wherever I want and I can move this wherever I want, but if I move this, it moves together. So let's undo that. So I'm going to undo that nonsense. What else could I do? I could get my coincident tool and I could say take this and then make it coincident not with the endpoint but the line. Okay, now it connected that to the line. Now what can I do? I can get this. I got to get select. I can get this and I can move it around, but it's going to stay on that line. I can get this and move it around. I can get this and move it around. I can do anything I want as long as the end of this line stays connected to this line. You see, this dot is pinned to that line. So I can take a point and I can lock it to another point, or I can take a point and I can lock it to a line. Just something to know. What else did we learn? We learned about this tool, which is the horizontal and vertical tool. Now, it's going to guess horizontal or vertical based on what you're closer to. So this one is probably going to guess to make it horizontal. If I click on it, and why does it not like that? Okay. I think what it is I've over constrained it. So let me just select these and let me delete those. Okay, now let me just get a line. I'm just going to draw a line like this and check. Now I can come and I can get the vertical horizontal tool and I can click on that and it's going to make it vertical. Why? Because it was closer to vertical. If I get a line and I go like this and then click, if I get it, what is it going to guess this time? It's going to guess horizontal. Okay, so it'll make it horizontal, it'll make it vertical depending on what it is. So what constraints have we learned? We've learned coincident can tie a point to a line or a point to a point. Okay, vertical and horizontal, take a line and make it vertical, or take a line and make it horizontal. What other things could we do? Okay, I'm going to get select, I'm going to erase these. Okay, I could get a line and I could draw a line, check mark, click, drag, click, check mark. Okay, check mark. Okay, I could get select. I'm going to move this over here and move this here. So I've got, I'm sorry, I need to get rid of that. I got one too many segments here. Okay, now these are two random lines. What if I got the collinear and I clicked on this and then I clicked on that? What does it do? It lines them up. Now what can I do? I can move this anywhere I want, but it keeps it lined up over here. I can move this anywhere I want. I can move this anywhere I want. I can move this anywhere I want. I can change the size. I can change the size, but what always happens? They're collinear. So we understand coincident, we understand collinear, so we understand those. Let's talk about circles. C will allow me to draw a circle. Click, drag, click, I've got a circle. Click, drag, click, I've got a circle. Now what can I do? Concentric. I select this circle, I select this circle, let's see, select this circle, select that circle, boom. They are concentric. Now if I get my select tool, I can come in here, I can make this one bigger or smaller, I can make this one bigger or smaller, or I could move them, but what are they? They're always concentric. Concentric is for circles, all right? Let me move those, let me get rid of that. Okay, let me get this, come back to our rectangle. Okay, now what we are going to talk about now is midpoint. So I'm going to draw a line, click, drag, click, check mark, click, drag, click, check mark. Okay, now what can I do with midpoint? I can select midpoint and I can select this point and this line, and what does it do? It puts the end point at the midpoint. Let me undo that. Okay, midpoint, I say take that point and line it up with that line, and now what can I do? I can move this, but you see as I'm making the line longer, this always adjusts to be in the middle. Long or short, it's always in the middle, or over here. It's tied to it and it is in the middle. Okay, that's pretty useful. What else could I do? I could say take the midpoint of that line and put it on the midpoint of that line. Now what can I do? Okay, I can move this around or resize it, move this around, resize it, but no matter what, the two midpoints are coincident. Okay, so we know coincident, we know collinear, we know concentric, and we know midpoints. Well, midpoints are pretty useful besides that, because I think you can do other things besides that. So let's try circle. Okay, there's circle. And then what if we did midpoint, and then we said between the circle and that line? Boom. Now that circle is always going to be there. So if I come over and I say select, and I change this to 65, look at that. This circle is still in the middle. Or if I come here and I say make this 45, enter. Oops, now that was not expected. Let's undo this. Okay, so let's see, why did that do that? I see why. Because what happened when I put that circle there, I took this off. It took it off. Let's see if I can put that back on there. So that is a vertical horizontal on this, okay, and on this. Okay, so now if I do that, let's see if I change this to 45, enter. Yeah, now it's behaving as expected. So what happened when I put that circle there, it sort of undid that constraint that was making this line stay horizontal, and then I got that unexpected behavior. But then don't panic, we understand constraints and it does what we want. Okay, so what all do we understand so far? We understand coincident will make a point joined to a point, or a point joined to a line. If it's joined to the line, it can move up and down the line. On a point, it's pinned. Other things can happen, but it stays pinned. Collinear just means this line is always lined up with this line. You can go like this, you can go like this, but they stay in a line. Midpoint, you can take a point and tie it to a midpoint, or you can put two midpoints together, but you're aligning things along a midpoint. Then as you change dimensions, that midpoint stays lined up. Very useful. Let's look at parallel. Let's get a line. I can draw a line, check mark, draw another line, check mark, and if I get the parallel, I click on this, it makes them parallel. Now I can move this further or closer, I can move it around, but if I try to change the direction, it won't change the direction, because why? They have to stay parallel to each other. So once I do that, they stay parallel. If I take this and delete it, then I can come in and I can spin that around. That's parallel. It's very useful. Okay, what other constraints do we have? Perpendicular. All right, you can probably guess what this is. Line, okay, check mark, line, check mark. And if I click parallel, I want this parallel to that. Okay, they're parallel. Now, parallel does not have to mean that they're joined. It's just this one's pointing in a parallel direction to the other. If we wanted to join them, what would we do? We would go concentric between that point, and then they're joined together. Let's undo that. What's another thing that we could do? We could go concentric between the line, between the end point and the line, and now that is going to be along the line. But if I come in here, I can select this and I can move it as long as it stays lined up with that other line. Okay, so that is perpendicular with a coincident set in. We've already talked about horizontal and vertical, and then now tangent is a pretty important one. So let me show you what tangent does. What if I have a circle, click, draw a circle, and then I have a line, and then let's just say I draw the line like that. Okay, and now I want to have tangent. And I want to have tangent between this and this. What does it do? It makes this circle line up with the tangent of that line. So if I get select, select that, you see what it is? It keeps it lined up like that. Let me show you why that's important. Okay, let me show you why that one's important. Let me draw a rectangle. Okay, so we'll type in R, come down here like that. We're not going to worry about dimensioning it. Let's come in and remember the fillet tool. Let's say fillet, and I do this and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and then this, and this. Okay, do you see how I filleted that? And we'll just say a fillet of 4. All right, look at that. Now all of a sudden, look at this. Let's see what I can do. I haven't dimensioned it, so I'm free to change the dimension. Look at that. I'm free to change the dimension. Okay, but do you see that no matter how I change the dimension, it keeps the corners nicely rounded? Why is that? Because I have a constraint that is making this part of the circle tangent to this line. So you see this line is tangent with this portion of the circle. What if I eliminated that? Okay, now let's start playing with it. Okay, look at that. You see it doesn't have to be tangent anymore, so I can get crazy behaviors. Okay, I can get crazy behaviors. So what did I better do? I better go back in there and say I want that to be tangent to that. Did that get that? There it is. Okay, so you see this is saying that's tangent to that, and this is saying that's tangent to that, and then that keeps your corners rounded, makes things work right. There's one more tool that I want to okay, I'll do a couple more. Okay, so let me get select, get rid of that. Okay, let's just say that I have a rectangle like that, and then I have a rectangle like that, and then let's use the equal tool. Let's say I want to make that equal to that. It made the line segments equal. I could make this equal to this, and now the two of them are equal, but I did it by setting the different things the same. Now if I come in and I get this, let's see, if I change that, it changes this. If I change this, it changes this. You see it made them equal, but it made them equal kind of two different ways. And so let's take that. Let's see if I can. That could be tricky. No, that one's going to be hard to get rid of because it's right on the top of it. Okay, there, I got it. Now look at what happens. You see here it changes because this one is still equal with this one, but now if I change this, it doesn't change that one because those aren't equal anymore. Similarly, let's look at a circle. I could make this circle, and then I could make this circle, and then I could say I want them to be equal, and now they're equal. Okay, so now if I come in, I say select, I make this one bigger, the other one gets bigger. So you see how if you're mindful when you're designing, first of all, understanding the constraints, that if Fusion 360 isn't doing what you want, it's probably because there's a constraint in there, and you just got to look, and then you can get it to work by figuring out what the constraint is that's causing your problem. And then if you start using them to your advantage, all of a sudden your designs will do what you want them to because they're following the constraints that you set. So like, let me give you an example of that. Okay, let me make a rectangle. So I'm going to make a rectangle. Okay, and now what if I make another rectangle? Okay, I make another rectangle. Now what if I do this? What if I say distance, and I say from here to here is 4? Okay, and now I say from here to here is 4. Okay, now I want you to look at what happens. Okay, if I say select this, no matter what I do with this, it is respecting those two things as a frame. So what do I need to do? I need to come here, and I need to set that at 4. And then what do I need to do? I need to set that. Dimension, I'm having trouble here. From here to here. This last one is giving me a little trouble, so I need to click off of it. So dimension here to here is 4. Okay, now look at what happens if I select this. Is I come in, no matter what I do with any of these sides, it respects that 4 frame. So you see, if I design something this way by putting that constraint in, I could have dimensioned the outside rectangle and dimensioned the inside rectangle, but if I'd done that and changed the outside one, I would have had to continuously change the inside one. So if you design mindfully, purposefully, with these putting these constraints in, it'll do what you want it to. Okay, now delete. Let me show you one other one. I'm going to do a line. Okay, so I'll come down here, click the check mark. I'm going to do a circle here, and I'm going to do a circle here. Okay, symmetry. I want symmetry. I want symmetry between this circle, and I want symmetry between this circle, and I want it symmetric about that. So what does it do? For those two circles to be symmetric, they need to be an equal distance away from this line. And what else? For them to be symmetric, they have to be the same size. So now let me get the select tool. Let me move this. What does it do? It keeps them symmetric about this. What if I change the size? It changes the size of that because they're symmetric. So what I hope is you've gotten a first look at these constraints. You understand what they are. You understand how to make them not keep you from doing what you want to do. So you understand sometimes you might have to take a constraint off to do what you want it to do, and then how to start using them as your friend. So step one, get where they're not your enemy. Step two, start making them your friend. And as you design by purposely putting constraints in, it can make things a whole lot easier. So like let me show you one thing. Okay, let's say I'm going to draw a rectangle. Okay, here's a rectangle. Okay, let me draw another rectangle over here. Okay, let's say that these were kind of mating parts. Well, if they are mating parts, what would I want them to be? I would want them to be the same size. And so I could come in and I could click equal and say I want this to be equal to that, and I want this to be equal to this. Okay, and now let's look at what happens. If I come in and I get my selection tool and I select this and I change the size of one, it changes the size of the other. That makes it easy, because if this then propagates through the design, that if you change the size of one, it's matched to the size of the other. And even if you've done extrusions and stuff, you can just change one parameter and all the other ones are adjusted. And so being successful in 360 is understanding constraints and using constraints to make the design behave the way that you want it to behave. So what I want you to do is, this has just been a first look at constraints, but this is what you got to understand. Being successful in Fusion 360, you're going to win the battle or you're going to lose the battle on your 3D sketch. The three things you have to be mindful of in your 2D sketch is dimension, position, and constraints. And if you will design in 2 dimensions, being mindful of dimension, position, and constraints, you will start loving Fusion 360. All of a sudden now it'll do everything that you want it to, because if something's not working, just go in and see what constraint is not what you expected. Okay, I hope this makes sense, man. This, I hope, was not a tedious long lesson. What I'm hoping you will do is, if you like this lesson, I hope you'll think about giving us a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to the channel. Think about sharing this with other people. Most of all, I really love your comments. Put your comments down below. Okay, I like this to kind of be a forum for discussion. I read all the comments. I try to respond to all of them that I can. Okay, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.